يلا هسه ادخلوا. Okay, so as we mentioned, today will be our we will be taking our first biochemistry lecture for this semester, and it's going to be about proteins. First, we will start with some definitions. طبعا proteins they are the most abundant molecules in our system. من يعرف شنو يعني كلمة abundant؟
دكتورة يعني شائع؟
يعني مو شائع، يعني المسيطرة، يعني أكثر كمية منها موجودة بالسيستم. في البيولوجيكال سيستم أكثر أنواع المولكيولز هي البروتينز. إلى درجة the proteins they constitute 50% of the dry cellular weight. خلينا نفرض this is a cell and this is in its dry weight. يعني there are no liquids in it. If you see, these are the different components of the cell. There are lipids, there are polyamines, glycogen, types of RNA, DNA, metabolites, and then there are proteins. And you can see the proteins, they take almost 50% of the cellular weight. فإذا البروتينز هي تشكل 50% من مكونات الخلية الجافة مالتنا. Okay? This means these are very important molecules. This means the system, our biological system, depends on those molecules in a very big way. The major components, they are major components in the muscle, in the skin, and in the bones. موجودة في كل أجزاء الجسم البشري and يكونون أكثر جزء من كل هذا المكان هم فيه. The molecular weight of the proteins varies from several thousands to several millions. So يبدي البروتين molecular weight من عدة آلاف إلى أن يوصل حتى ملايين. طبعا molecular weight depends اللي قصدي البروتين. The protein, what the protein is, which kind of protein, what is its action, it all depends on what is the component of this protein and what's its molecular weight and what is its structure. شنو التركيب مالته، ايش قد وزنه، ايش قد حجمه، وايش قد كبره، يحدد لنا نوع البروتين وشنو طبيعة عمله. طبعا we will study about what are the functions of protein later on. If we do complete hydrolysis to the protein, we're using hydrochloric acid, we will have alpha amino acids. Alpha amino acids. تذكرون أخذنا الأمينو acids in organic chemistry. Remember we studied carboxylic acids, and one of the types was amino acids, and we said they are the building blocks of the proteins. Who remembers that? من يتذكر؟ إذن البروتين يتكون من مجموعة من الأمينو أسيدز المتصلين together. من يتذكر شنو اسم البوند أو حكيتها؟ What is the name of the bond? Peptide bond. So amino acids are connected together by peptide bonds to make the protein. Right? In other words, proteins are polymers of amino acids. So what are polymers? شنو يعني polymer؟
متعدد.
البوليمر هو المجموعة من الامينو اسيدز المتصلة مع بعض تكون مركب كبير. هذا هو البوليمر. البروتين وعبارة عن مجموعة امينو اسيدز مرتبطة مع بعض، وقلنا عدد هاي الامينو اسيدز وانواعها والطريقة السيكونس مالتها هو اللي يحدد لي نوع البروتين والفانكشن. واضح؟ So we will talk a little bit about the functions of proteins. We start with the proteins as enzymes, and we all know that in our biological system our biological system actually works as chemical reactions. those reactions need catalysts. And the most abundant catalysts are enzymes, and those enzymes are actually proteins. They could be simple proteins or conjugated proteins. المهم انه الانزيمز اللي هي العامل المساعد في كل تفاعلات الجسم مالتنا هي عباره عن بروتينات ممكن تكون بسيطه او معقده. Proteins work as structural components. So we have structural proteins holding our living system together, and an example of that is collagen. بتعرفون انتم الجلد البروتين مال الجلد هو الكولاجين، والكولاجين هو اللي يمسك الجلد وينطي شكله اللي هو عليه. Collagen is a protein. And then one of the functions of proteins is structure. Hormones. We know most hormones are considered lipids. Like, and there are some proteins which are not lipids. These proteins which act as messengers, such as insulin, they are actually proteins. Transport. Proteins can work as a transport molecule. They can carry molecules, they can carry ions from one place to another. And a big example is the hemoglobin. Hemoglobin في الحقيقة is a protein, and it carries oxygen from the lungs to the cells. Other functions such as protective proteins. Proteins can work as protective against the foreign substances released into our system, and these are included in white blood cells. Also, proteins can be toxins. Toxins شنو يعني؟ سموم. ممكن تكون سموم. مثال على ذلك السنيك فينم، يعني أصل الحية، هذا عبارة عن بروتين لكن هو toxic to other animals أو other species حتى للإنسان. Transmembrane proteins, transmembrane transport. So many proteins work as transporter from in and out the cell. تعرفون انتم الخلية بها جدار خلية، وجدار الخلية be some proteins which enable the transfer of sodium, potassium, ATP from in and out of the cells. Contractile proteins such as actins and myosin. And also proteins can work as storage like eggs and seeds. وكذلك defense mechanism in our system are proteins such as antibodies. So the antibodies that we make against any foreign bodies in our system are also proteins. Okay. Now, because we're studying biochemistry, we have to go down to the levels of an atom. So we want to know what is actually the composition to the point of an atom, the composition of those proteins. Because the proteins are made of amino acids, if we hydrolyze more further, if we hydrolyze the protein, we get amino acids. If we go further and analyze those amino acids, what do we get? We get carbon, which is 50 to 55%, and high percentages أريدها من عندكم طبعا شباب تحفظوها. We get hydrogen, which is 6 to 7%, and we have oxygen, 19 to 24%, nitrogen, 13 to 19%, and sulfur, 0 to 4%. So these are the 5 major elements in our system, in the protein. They make up the protein. These are the 5 major elements, but there are also small amounts of other elements such as lead, ferrous, copper, iodine, magnesium, zinc. موجودة بكميات قليلة، لكن المكونات الرئيسية راح تكون هي هذه ال5 atoms. Amino acids. Because we're studying proteins, and we said that the protein is built of amino acids, then we need to know a little bit more about amino acids. These are the building blocks of proteins, and we have studied them in organic chemistry, if you remember. They are organic compounds with two functional groups. We have the carboxyl group, and we have the amino group or amine group. You can say amino acids or you can say amino acids, depending on which accent you're talking. It doesn't matter, both right. There are 500 known amino acids in the nature, like only 20 amino acids are repeatedly found in the structure of proteins in our systems. These 20 amino acids are in the genetic code of all living creatures. They can be positively charged, negatively charged, or zero charged. So this is going to be depending on their classification, and we will study this later. احنا طبعا قلنا انه الامينو acids they make up the protein. The same amino acids structured in a certain way, they give me a certain protein. This protein has a certain function to do. If the sequence changes, يعني if I have alanine, leucine, tyrosine, this sequence will make up certain protein. If I have leucine, alanine, tyrosine, then this will make up a different protein. If you understand what I'm saying? الامينو اسيد سيكونس يعني ترتيب الامينو اسيدز في البروتين هو اللي يحدد structure of protein ويحدد الفانكشن of this protein. ولذلك كل بروتين له it has its own sequence of amino acids and also the types of amino acids involved in making this protein. They are linked together with peptide bonds, صحيح, to make up a polypeptide, and this polypeptide is the protein. But can anybody tell me what is a peptide bond? يلا شباب, who remembers in English? Hello?
Yes, doctor.
Yes, please.
Yes, doctor.
Peptide bond is?
Yes, can I answer?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Peptide bond is like a covalent bond, but is here because it join the two amino acid together, we give it another name and say
sure. So the peptide bond joins two amino acids together, but what is it? Peptide bond is the bond between the carbon from the C terminal of one amino acid and the nitrogen from the N terminal of another amino acid. Okay? So the peptide bond تربط لي two amino acids together, صحيح؟ لكن من وين؟ من الطرف الكربوني من واحد مع الطرف الأميني من واحد. So it is a carbon-nitrogen bond between two amino acids. Those amino acids will be linked together by peptide bonds, and then we will reach a point where we have a polypeptide. N terminus اللي هو الفيرست end هو هذا. قلنا N terminus هو terminus that starts or ends with nitrogen, and the C terminus is the one that ends with carbon. The number and sequence of amino acid residues, طبعا, they are present in a polypeptide. They determine the type of protein and the structure and the function of the protein. So we're talking about peptides. وقلنا البيبتايدز هو عبارة عن مجموعة amino acids linked together. But how many amino acids define the type of peptide that we see? مثال, we have a dipeptide and from its name di معناتها شنو؟
ثنائي.
معناتها 2. So this means this dipeptide has 2 amino acids joined together by 1 peptide bond. An example of that is aspartame, and this is a sweetening agent that we use instead of sugar. بدل السكر يستخدمون sweetening agent. هذا عبارة عن aspartame, and it is composed of aspartic acid and phenylalanine. This is an example of a dipeptide. هذا مطلوب من عندكم هذول الاثنين تحفظوهم، هذول المجموعة يعني أريد تحفظوهم. أنطيتكم مثال على كل واحد، بس مثال واحد. عندنا tripeptides ومن اسمه أيضا tri means we have 3 amino acids linked together. إذا عندنا 3 amino acids يعني كم peptide bonds؟ 2 peptide bonds. المثال على ذلك is the GSH. This is a type of protein that protects against hemolysis. هذا البروتين هو عبارة عن 3 amino acids linked together: glutamic acid, cysteine, and glycine. And this protein breaks down the hydrogen peroxide اللي هذا يسوي cell damage. Okay, so it helps in absorption of amino acids and protects against hemolysis of red blood cells by breaking down the hydrogen peroxide اللي ممكن يسبب cell damage. عندنا الأوكتا peptides. Octa means 8, which means it has 8 amino acids. If it has 8 amino acids, then how many peptide bonds we have?
7.
7%. An example of that are hormones such as oxytocin and vasopressin. Vasopressin اللي هو الانتي-diuretic hormone. النوع الآخر is the polypeptide, and هذا it comes from 10 and up, 10 amino acids and more, over 10 amino acids. This is a polypeptide. It's also a protein. An example of that is the insulin hormone. Any questions here? Okay. Now, in order to understand amino acids, we need to know a little bit about their classification. So once we know their classification, once we know how they are classified and how they work, we will know why they can make up different types of proteins with the same, we can make up different types of proteins with the same amino acids. So we're going to classify them 5 types of classifications. First one, depending on their polarity, whether it's polar, non-polar, or that. According to structural, according to nutrition, metabolic fate, number of carboxylic acids. This is how it's classified. What we will study today is the polarity, nutritional, and metabolic fate. We will start with polarity, and we have 4 types of amino acids depending on their polarity. The first type is a non-polar, an amino acid with a non-polar R group. So هذا هو الامينو acid اللي عندنا. نفترض let's take the alanine. This is the straight chain, and then we have an R. Okay, this is the R. This is the R. وهكذا. Those R groups are non-polar, which means they have no charge, they are hydrophobic, and they may contain aromatic or aliphatic groups. واضح? So I don't need you to memorize those types of amino acids, but I need you to know, if I show you an amino acid, you have to know. إذا أعطيك مثلا أحط لك هذا الأمينو أسيد وأقول لك is this amino acid polar, non-polar, or positively charged, negatively charged, or no charge? So what you will tell me is that this amino acid is a non-polar amino acid because it has a non-polar R with no charge. Okay? The second type of amino acids is an amino acid which is polar, but the R group also has no charge. So it is polar because the R group may have a polar molecule within it. مثلا CH2 هنا OH. If you remember when we studied the OH, it makes the compound polar, the chronyl water. When we said the water molecule is polar because of the OH.
هيدروجين.
الهيدروجين والأكسجين مع بعض, it makes it polar. Here, this R also has an OH group. This one else also. This one doesn't have an OH group, but it has a C double bond O and an NH2. So these are polar groups as well. So then this is a polar amino acid with no charge on the R. All those R's have no charge. فانتبهوا الشارج اللي بنحكي عنها هي الشارج اللي على الار مو شارج مال الستريت تشين مالت الامينو اسيد. Okay. The third type of amino acid is a polar amino acid with a negatively charged R group. So this R group may contain an extra carbonyl group, which makes it electrochemical acidic behavior, and it's going to be charged. An example here, if you can see, this is the straight chain of the amino acid. This is my R group, and the R group has a C double bond O, C O, yeah, O, يعني a carboxyl group. And this carboxyl group is charged, negatively charged R group. Same here. This is the R, and it is negatively charged. This is a polar amino acid with a negatively charged R group. And the last type is a polar amino acid with a positively charged R group. And this one will have an extra amino group with it. You can see here, extra amino group. Here, extra amino group. And so these are charged with positive charge. The other type of classification of amino acid, and this is the most important classification that we have, because this is our work, this is our biochemistry, this is our biology. We have two types of amino acids, essential amino acids and non-essential amino acids. If you remember, we said there are 20 amino acids which are genetically coded in our system. We need them all 20 amino acids are needed in our biological system for our body to work properly. But some of them are considered essential and some are not. And now we will understand what do we mean by essential and non-essential. So essential amino acids means they are very important amino acids to be eaten within our diet. So they cannot be made by our body. Okay? Okay, I want to do something here. They cannot be made by our system, and so we need to have them taken from our diet. So these are called essential amino acids. The other type is non-essential amino acids, and these are made by our body, and as a result, we don't need them in our diet. واضح الفرق? So essential, we need them in our diet. Non-essential, we don't need them in our diet. Why? Because the non-essential are made in our system, بينما الessential are not made in our system, but still they are very important to our system, so they are needed to be taken through our diet. This will show you the differences between them, and you will know which of the 20 amino acids are essential and which are non-essential. هذول تحفظوهم. These need to be memorized by heart. So the essential amino acids قلنا obtained from nutrition: leucine, isoleucine, valine, histidine, lysine, methionine, phenylalanine, threonine, and tryptophan. While the non-essential amino acids, which are synthesized in our system, they are alanine, arginine, asparagine, aspartic acid, cysteine, glutamic acid, glutamine, lysine, choline, serine, tyrosine. So if you calculate the number of those amino acids together, they will make up 20. Okay? 9 here, essential. 11 here, non-essential. واضح? Okay. Now, this classification depends on the metabolic role and what the amino acids serve as. So we have some alpha amino acids that serve as precursors for many biological reactions, such as synthesis of glucose, بنسميهم glucogenic or glycogenic, synthesis of fat, so they are ketogenic. So these actually are three groups يعني. Glycogenic amino acids, and هذول alanine, this is to be memorized: aspartate, lysine, and methionine. Ketogenic amino acids are leucine, lysine. Glycogenic and ketogenic, which means they work both ways: isoleucine, phenylalanine, tyrosine, and tryptophan. بعد عندنا tyrosine in particular, it is a precursor for thyroid hormone. Now, I have homework for you, and this homework says, find an example of another amino acid or other amino acids that serve as precursors and tell me for what. So هذا إن شاء الله راح ينزل لكم بالclassroom. Any questions? Right. So the last, but not least, okay. We have the properties of amino acids. They are genetically coded. They have the capacity to polymerize. شنو يعني capacity to polymerize؟ قلنا يكونون بوليمرات اللي هي البوليبيبتايدز اللي هي في الحقيقة تصير بالنهاية proteins. They have acid-based properties, and they have very different structures and chemical functionality. And they are chiral. Remember the chirality? They are all chiral except for glycine. So alpha carbon of all amino acids is chiral except for glycine. And هسه منو يقول لي why glycine is not chiral؟ راح ارسم لكم الجلايسين. Glycine is
because it has a double point.
Double point.
let me draw it for you first, and then you tell me why is the carbon and then this carbon and okay. حمزة صابر هسه دق عليه يوسف ولا خلينا نجيب. Okay, so الألفا كربون ياهو this one. إيش هاي مو كايرال؟
Because it has don't has 4 different groups.
Same molecular?
doesn't attach to four different groups.
Hello, شباب. I'm sorry. صار عندي disconnection. تسمعوني هسه؟
نعم دكتور.
نعم دكتور.
هسه نرجع للمحاضرة نكمل وبعدين أعود هذا الخطأ أحاول أشيله من التسجيل. So, who can tell me why the glycine, the alpha carbon of glycine is not chiral, is achiral? ليش؟
دكتور.
Because
يلا إيه؟
يعني تتصل
because
باثنين.
it don't attach to four different groups.
It's not attached to four different groups. It has two hydrogens. So all other amino acids have chiral carbons except
دكتور
for
الشاشة ما راحت.
المشاركة راحت دكتور.
مو قبل. خلينا نرجع من الجزء راح لازم نسوي presentation. Present again your entire screen. Okay, are we back? اوكي تشوفون؟
نعم دكتور.
جيد. بس نحكي على الكايرال again على مود تتسجل عندكم. So if we talk about chirality or chirality, all alpha carbons of every amino acid is chiral except for glycine, and glycine is a 3 carbon amino acid. Here it's going to be double bond O. And then so this means there are okay. So this is the alpha carbon, and it's like your colleague said, it is not chiral, it is achiral because it's not connected to four different groups, it has two hydrogens connected to it. Okay, right. So now we go back to the basic amino acid structure. طبعا احنا انتم اخذتوا الامينو اسيد بالorganic and you know what the structure is. قلنا الالفا chiral alpha carbon is chiral, and قلنا there is COOH, a carboxyl group. It has an amino group. It has an alpha carbon which is connected to all those groups, and then it has an R side chain also connected to it. At pH 7, the amino acid which is uncharged goes Zwitterian. Now, who can tell me what the word Zwitterian means? حد سامع بهاي الكلمة قبل؟ So zwitterion means that the molecule contains equal amounts of positive and negative charge. Okay? So at pH 7, كل حامض أميني, every amino acid becomes zwitterion. Okay? If it is uncharged, it will have equal positive and negative charge. Okay? So amino acids have reached zwitterion at 7, and they have a tetrahedral structure. Now that we finished amino acids, عندكم سؤال في amino acids? Okay. We will go now to protein structures. Proteins have 4 types of structures. كل بروتين يتواجد في الطبيعة في جسمنا ب 4 types of structure: primary, secondary, tertiary, and quaternary. We will start with the primary structure, and this is the normal 2D structure. It is a unique sequence of amino acids, مجرد إنه مجموعة amino acids linked together by peptide bonds. They are the structure of this protein and the sequence of those amino acids is determined by the inherited genetic information. يعني المعلومات الوراثية تنطي إيعاز تقول له يا RNA يسوي لي بروتين فلان شيء بهذا الترتيب. So it tells it حط لي سيستين وبصفه سيرين وبصفه اليوسين وبصفه فن الألانين مثلا وهكذا, and it starts making up a polypeptide which makes up the protein, and this unique sequence is specific for this protein for its specific function. Okay? إذن السيكونس الخاص من الأمينو أسيدز الترتيب هذا هو خاص بهذا البروتين بالذات. The secondary structure, these are the results from hydrogen bond formation between the hydrogen of the N-terminal group of the peptide bond and the carboxyl of another peptide bond. Okay? This is a peptide bond for this protein, and there's another one that comes along to it from the same protein, and then we have an H here, and then there's C double bond O here, and then it becomes, sorry, we'll go back to here. The type of هنا لازم تعرفون and the type of bond here, what kind of bonds here موجودة عندنا؟
Peptide.
الصبح كانوا كل شاطرين كل سؤال يجاوبون. We have the type of bonds in the primary structure is a peptide bond. Here we have the peptide bond اللي made up our protein, so we do have a peptide bond, and we have hydrogen. Okay, so the peptide bond made up the first structure, هذا the primary structure, and then when it wanted to become a secondary structure, it had to have a hydrogen bond حتى يقدر يحافظ على الشكل مستقر. So the secondary structure has two main forms, an alpha helix or beta sheets. So the alpha helix هو السبايرال، من يصير سبايرال يجي هو نفس البروتين يسوي روحه على شكل سبايرال، and then يجي الهيدروجين bonding between one peptide bond and the one next قدامه. So see here هذا النيتروجين من هذا الامينو اسيد وسوى العفو مو بيبتايد، سوى هيدروجين بوند مع الاكسجين من هذا الامينو اسيد، وايضا كذلك هذا النيتروجين مع البيبتايد مع الاكسجين وهكذا حتى يكون لي شكل مستقر. Or the other type is beta sheet, and this is another form of the secondary structure. two or more polypeptides are linked together by hydrogen bonds, and this hydrogen bond أيضا between the H of NH and of one chain and the carboxyl oxygen from the chain next to it. وده تشوفون هسه هنا this is hydrogen NH from this amino acid, and there's hydrogen bond مع this oxygen from the الشيت المقابل إلها، فهذا يسموه بيتا شيتس. إذن the secondary structure, how many bonds are in the secondary structure؟
Two bonds. Two bonds.
أحسنتم. Two bonds.
Two.
Peptide bonds and
Hydrogen bonds.
hydrogen bonds. And then primary structure has peptide bonds only. Secondary structure, peptide and hydrogen. نجي على tertiary structure. A tertiary structure, this is determined by a variety of interactions. So this has bond formation between the R groups. Between the R groups, okay? And the polypeptide backbone. فبهيك حالة راح يصير عندنا فد interaction من ال R group وبين ال R group وبين البوليبeptide. اللي يعني كل R group من امينو اسيد معين بجهة راح يرتبط مع R group بامينو اسيد اخر, and this happens by disulfide bond. Okay, so hydrogen bonds or ionic bonds are already there. They are hydrophobic interactions between the non-polar groups. Structures are B, how many bonds? That's right. قولوا لي يلا. Active. Hello. Tertiary structure. كم نوع من البونز B?
3 bonds.
Senti. 3 bonds. Peptide. دي لي اياهم.
البيبتايد والهيدروجين بوند.
Yes.
ionic bond.
هسه احنا بدنا نحكي عن الرئيسية. راح نقول disulfide.
disulfonamide.
Okay. So weak interactions, هذول الرئيسية. But there are two types of interactions. Weak interactions اللي هي hydrogen bonds, ionic bonds, hydrophobic interactions. لكن strong interactions هي هاي اللي تهمنا احنا بالترشري اللي هي الدايسلفايد bonds. ماشي؟ الويك بها بس دول ويك ما يحافظون على شكل الستركتشر بصورة كاملة. القوية هي الدايسلفايد بوند. اوكي؟ فإذا الترشري has 3 types of bonds: peptide bonds, hydrogen bonds, and disulfide bonds. نطلع عندنا الأخير اللي هو quaternary structure, and this results from the aggregation of 2 or more polypeptide subunits. يعني جتي هاي اليونت تجمعت من هاي اليونت and هاي اليونت هاي اليونت from the same protein, and then they bond together with a non-covalent interaction. Okay, like H bonds, ionic hydrophobic interactions. ويعني بهيك حالة راح يكون عندنا نوع بعد جديد آخر اللي هو non-covalent interactions. أمثلة عليها الكولاجين, which is a fibrous protein of 3 polypeptides, and it is super coiled like a rope. بس كأنه حبل يتكشف شيء على شيء, and لذلك الستركتشر يكون قوي بالنسبة للconnective tissue. والهيموغلوبين, which is a globular protein with 4 polypeptide chains. Okay. هسه إذا والكوادريل شو حيصير عندنا؟ peptide bond, hydrogen bond, بعد disulfide bonds and covalent. العفو non-covalent interactions. اوكي. إذا البروتين structure راح يكون اما primary بعدين from primary يصير ب hydrogen bonding further يسوي لنا secondary further يصير disulfide bonding يسوي لي tertiary further covalent bonding يسوي لنا quaternary. لهنا انتهت محاضرتنا اليوم ويعذروني شويه لانه ما لي خلق قلت لكم صح صرت احسن من السن بس any questions